Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. Before we kick off on the show today, just to let you know that it's a Zoom call I had with Toby Daniels from Social Media Week. Really interesting chat. So the quality is going to be a bit different, a bit weird, but deal with it, you'll be fine. But first off, I would like to thank our sponsor, which is Coros. Coros was very recently born after the coming together of two businesses, Spreadfast and Lithium. Coros is a tech software company with over 15 years of leadership in marketing, care and communities. And Coros now offers one platform that unites marketing and care and helps brands create customers for life. Please go and check those guys out at Coros.com. That's KHOROS.com. Tell them I said hi and thanks, guys. The sponsorship means more than I can say. So let's get on with the show. Hello, my name is Tom Ollerton, and this is the Shiny New Object podcast. This is a podcast about new marketing technology, and every week I have the pleasure and the privilege to interview someone inspirational from the industry, and this week is no different. I have Toby Daniels, who is the CEO of Crowdcentric, and also the founder and exec director of Social Media Week. And before Toby introduces himself, I just want to say how pivotal Social Media Week has been in my career. It was always the kind of landmark social event, and obviously having a social agency background, Social Media Week was really that week where you kind of got your shit together and really were able to put yourself up against the best of the industry and really see how good you were. And Toby's done an amazing job of making that a global brand in its own right. So I was lucky enough to meet Toby when I was in New York last year, and we had a brilliant chat, and I begged him to come on the podcast, and he's here. So Toby, for those of you who don't know who you are and what you do, can you give us a little bit of a background?
Definitely, Tom. Thanks for having me, man. I'm very excited to be on your show. And also thank you for the very kind and flattering words about Social Media Week. I'm always very inspired to hear how our platform, our conferences have like impacted people like you. It's very much at the core of why we exist. So I suppose for the uninitiated, I am, believe it or not, because I imagine many of your listeners are from the UK and probably can't really tell because I have a sort of weird sort of twang these days in regards to my accent, but I am from the UK, born in London, started my first agency back in the early 2000s, building websites for the entertainment industry, moved to New York, helped to run a UK company and sort of launch and run their North American operation for a couple of years before I left, and then decided to start Social Media Week. Not necessarily as a business, or not necessarily because I wanted to kind of turn it into a business, but I had time and an opportunity to bring some kind of interesting and smart people together to connect around sort of, some of the most important kind of questions, some of the most important opportunities and challenges that we were sort of facing back in like 2009, in regards to kind of how social media could sort of, impact and transform the way we do business, and how it could impact and transform things at a societal and also cultural level. And there's like really, and there's a very long kind of version of this, which I won't necessarily bore your listeners with, but there's a couple of kind of important sort of points of inspiration that led me to starting Social Media Week, which I think is always just like good for kind of the origin story. One, I went to Burning Man in 2008, and everyone has a kind of a transformative experience, brought on by a variety of different external factors. But my kind of big takeaway from Burning Man was it was just this extraordinary experience where like 50,000 people come together and self-organize around this like one idea, this one event, this one experience. And I was really sort of struck by that. The second point of inspiration is that Barack Obama was elected in 2008, sort of soon after I came back from Burning Man. The two events obviously are not in any way connected. But for me, what was interesting about Barack Obama was the fact that like social media played such a fundamentally important role in terms of how people could self-organize around a person and something, a cause or a mission or something that they care deeply about. And I thought that was really interesting. But what also struck me at the time is no one was really having those types of conversations. So Social Media Week was really just an opportunity to bring really smart people together, elevate the conversation, talk about things that are like, are grounded in sort of the role of technology, but like fundamentally about bigger and more important things. And so, yeah, we've sort of been on that journey now for the better part of a decade. And it's been a pretty extraordinary experience.
So thanks for the background. So it's traditional on this podcast for me to help the audience get to know you personally a bit better. So a few questions. So are you a reader of marketing books, or do you renounce them? And if so, which marketing books have you given as gifts to your staff or your buddies?
I would say I'm a pretty voracious consumer of like information, but I'm not really sort of stuck in one particular kind of lane or channel or particular kind of topic area, because I think that's probably like unhelpful. But yeah, of course, I read the sort of seminal kind of works of many of the sort of the major players who've written either business, marketing, entrepreneur sort of related books. But at the same time, I mean, I do read a lot. I tend to kind of listen even more. I mean, I'm just a massive consumer of podcasts. I'm a big consumer of audio books. I'm reading Michelle Obama's, or I'm listening, I should say, to Michelle Obama's Becoming Michelle book at the moment. And it's just an amazing story, an amazing kind of journey, and something that just kind of is completely outside of the realm of what I do from a marketing standpoint, but informative in all sorts of really important ways, particularly as an entrepreneur, particularly as we sort of think about the fight and what it means to really overcome adversity. And so that's been a definite point of inspiration, something I've really enjoyed. But I'd say that, like, in the context of marketing or our industry, the book that's resonated with me the most recently is Seth Godin's This Is Marketing. And I've bought this book for countless people, all my staff. Seth actually is going to be speaking at a conference in April. So I bought a bunch of books to give away to people during the conference as well, because I think it's the most important book in marketing today. And that's because Seth has this like unique capacity or capability to be able to write something that will be still relevant in 15 years time. Like, because he doesn't talk about tactics, and he doesn't talk about, the technology or the platforms necessarily. He alludes to it and talks about kind of, I think, some of the more problematic like aspects of where we are as an industry today. But he really talks in much more fundamental terms. He talks about what it means to be a great marketer. And This Is Marketing, I think, is one of his most important books that he's ever written. Because I think if you read it, the one thing that you'll walk away with is this idea that we need to do things differently. We need to be better. We need to understand that marketing is about changing people. It's about impacting consumers in significantly important and positive ways. It's about taking people on a journey. And we forget that sometimes as we get kind of caught up and carried away, or perhaps fixated on the latest new shiny object. So yeah, I'd strongly urge anyone, if you haven't already, to listen to read or listen to Seth's most recent book.
So just to get slightly technical, I love the way you describe yourself as a voracious consumer of information. You've talked about podcasts, you talked about audiobooks, very close to home for me. How do you decide what the right information is to either read or listen to?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, since like I first started to consume information online, I began the process of curating. And so in the very early days of like RSS feeds, I was meticulous about, what I wanted to pull into my feed based on kind of my broad level of sort of interest. And then naturally there are things that you are interested in and you want to read about. And then there are things that are always going to kind of exist on the periphery of that, or actually may even be completely left field. And so understanding how to use these systems, these tools, this sort of curatorial tools and technologies to not only bring in the things that you know are interesting and relevant to you, but also that can bring in things that will be a little bit more unexpected. So I've always sort of maintained that, and as the technology has evolved, so has the ways in which I kind of curate. But I'm still today just as meticulous about it in terms of, refining constantly and adjusting and also just like, trying to push off the things that I think are unhelpful to me. I mean, like, I'll give you a great example. Being a voracious consumer of information doesn't mean that I'm a voracious consumer of news. In fact, I've made a very conscious effort this year to actually completely ignore the day-to-day. I'm not interested in headlines. I'm not interested in what the media has to say in terms of what it's commenting on at this particular moment in time. And I'm not even just talking about like mainstream news. I don't even talk about like industry news to a certain extent. It's not helpful. It doesn't allow me to think deeply about things. It doesn't allow me to be contemplative or reflective. It just, it kind of forces you to get on this like Ferris wheel. And it doesn't necessarily make it easy for you to get off. And that's not helpful in terms of like how I want to educate myself and how I want to develop my own kind of point of view and perspective on things. I don't know whether that kind of like very specifically answers the question, but it's sort of more about like the methodology behind how I consume information.
So it's a lovely thought. And now, once again, I'm exactly the same. I don't read the news, and I assume if it's important enough, it'll make it to the dinner table or the water cooler or the bar, and someone will tell me about it. And it's interesting to hear that you don't follow necessarily marketing news day to day. And I think it's right. And I've never thought about it in this sense before, but it doesn't promote deep thinking or contemplative. I can't even speak. How do I say that?
Contemplation.
Contemplation. Whatever. Contemplation. Yeah. Thank you. It doesn't promote contemplation. So, and it's those two things that are going to help you see things that other people don't see. And when you see things that other people don't see, you see opportunity and so on and so forth. So, yes.
I mean, I think the point is that like we're sort of, we're immersed in information and stories and content, and it's not that I'm not like, it's not that I exist outside of that. I don't, and I'm not even pretending that like I am some kind of hermit that shuts myself away and I can block everything out. But there is just there is an opportunity to be kind of conscious and intentional about what you follow versus what you consume. Following the news is easy. I can tell you what's going on without necessarily having to consume every single news story. But being intentional about what you consume, right? I know that there is a plethora of bad food choices out in the world for me right now, based on how much the companies that peddle bad fast food advertise. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I will consume it. No, I'm quite intentional about what I put in my body in regards to healthy food, because I know it's good for me. And I have exactly the same philosophy when it comes to kind of information. And look, don't get me wrong. I do absolutely have the occasional Big Mac.
So what is the most useful thing that you've bought with your own money that you haven't expensed for work? So not a plane ticket, not a laptop upgrade. What is the thing that you've spent your hard-earned cash on that's helped you with work?
So my most favorite thing to do in New York City, which is where I live, is to Citi Bike, or Boris Bike, as you would call it in the UK. Or I'm not even sure they're called Boris Bikes.
No, not anymore. No,
because he is regarded in quite the same way as he was when
it's been written out. Written out of history by Santander.
Exactly, like the glory days, I think, of Boris Johnson were when he had a bike named after him, and I think it's been a downhill.
Should have stopped there, shouldn't
it? Since then. But yeah, no. So we have the same program here. Obviously, London had it first. They rolled out the Citi Bike program a couple of years ago, and the really cool thing about New York, and in particular in terms of the Citi Bike program, is that you can get pretty much everywhere within 30 minutes, which means that there is no commute or no meeting that I will go to that I tend to not either try and choose to take, if the weather is permitting, via Citi Bike. And the reason why the reason why I chose this as the thing that's most useful is because, one, obviously I get some exercise, which is key. It's always nice to kind of get out, get some fresh air, get some exercise when I'm commuting between meetings, or even if I'm just commuting between home and the office. But the second, and I think even more important reason, is there's something kind of like really magical that happens when I'm biking through the city, was I'm sort of simultaneously concentrating on not being hit by like a yellow cab. I'm also having an opportunity just to think. I can't look at my phone. Like there's no other means of transport. Well, if I was driving, I suppose I can't look at my phone, but I'm always going to be kind of listening to something or whatever. But like on a Citi Bike, it's like there's nothing other than just me like barreling through the streets of New York, heading to wherever I'm going, and just being able to kind of think. And I found that to be just like such a wonderful luxury. I love it.
So, not to get massively hippie-ish here, but I don't know if you've read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
No, I haven't. That sounds amazing.
Classic 60s philosophy thing. And they're talking about the beauty of maintaining and riding a motorbike. Not that I've ever done it, but it describes being on a motorbike. You're part of the scene. Whereas if you're in a car, you're kind of you're in the car. You're hemmed in. That is your universe. Whereas when you're on a motorbike, or in your case a Citi Bike, you are part of the surroundings. You're elevated and you're amongst it. And it's a very being alive experience.
Yeah,
and
totally.
it never occurred to me that the reason it's cool is because you're not on your phone, and you're absolutely right. You've nailed why I enjoy a Boris bike. There's far too many similarities between us. We need to find some differences here.
Yes.
Maybe we'll find it with this. So what's been your biggest work fuck up that you are so glad you made?
Well, I'm sort of known, certainly within my company, but perhaps amongst like some of my closest sort of industry friends, that I'm quite I sort of celebrate the fuck ups. I'm just I think they're just a hugely important part of how we grow and evolve. So every fuck up, basically, when I look back, particularly and most importantly, the non-repeatable ones, are really like the best, because they constantly push you to like always want to improve. And obviously you can't improve without fucking up. And just the emotional like aspects of making a mistake, and really feeling it like at a sort of an emotional level, but like really sort of the impact of that fuck up, like just affecting you in some significant way. And it feeling at the time just almost impossible or just really hard is just the greatest source of energy that I can sort of like access and harness in regards to what drives me to constantly want to grow and constantly want to improve. So there have just been like so many.
Be specific. Come on, tell me a toe cooler.
No. It's totally. I'm more than happy to talk specifics, and I'll reference something. If you don't mind, it is work related, but I think your audience will probably appreciate it. So most of my fuck ups tend to be kind of the result of like a really bad idea, which I for some reason have fallen in love with. I've fallen in love with a bad idea, and I need to see it through to kind of completion before I'm willing to admit that it was a bad idea, and so therefore it needs to become a fuck up before I'm willing to necessarily kind of let it go and move on. And in the very early days of Social Media Week, we had this I don't know why I'm saying we, because it was me and I need to own this. I had this grand idea of having the event take place simultaneously in multiple cities around the world, which in some cases it still does. And it's still a uniquely different aspect of the event. But in combination, though, with this idea that we would have Social Media Week happen, I mean, I think the biggest edition we ever did was 12 cities simultaneously. It was a monster. And I had this idea of like, well, wouldn't it be super cool to be able to travel to a bunch of these different cities over the course of like 1 week? which of course it would be, right? And we've had people. I had a very senior executive from PepsiCo, open our press conference in New York, fly to Sao Paulo, give a keynote, fly to London and give a keynote, and then fly back to London to give the closing keynote, all in a 5-day period. And I was so inspired by this. I thought, this is brilliant. We have to harness this. We have to productize this. This has to be a thing. So I came up with this idea called the borderless brands. And borderless brands was an opportunity for brand executives to travel to multiple social media cities within a 5-day period and speak and experience and meet all these wonderful, different and fairly sort of disparate communities. And then coupled with this idea was this idea of chartering a private jet and charging people 75 grand for the privilege of being on this plane. And that literally was like an idea I had that we tried to execute it. And of course, the first conversation we had with, said brand executive, and we said, hey, we'd like to invite you onto this thing. And they said, oh, this is great. We'd love to do this. What an exciting opportunity. And then we're like, yeah, it's going to cost you 75 grand. And they're like, well, no, I don't think that's going to happen.
You're going to charge the brand 75 grand.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the idea. And of course, I mean, listen, it's not a fuck up if it doesn't come from a really terrible place. And so, yeah, it's a good example of a moment in time many years ago, in the very early formative years of social media. This was a program and initiative that we thought we could get off the ground. And the problem was, the reason why we charged people 75 grand is because it's really expensive to rent a plane and put a whole bunch of people on it. And so, yeah, exactly. No shit. It would have been great to have you as part of those initial brainstorm where the will of Toby Daniels and my ability to be incredibly persuasive, unfortunately, prevented anyone from saying, hey, dude, this is a terrible idea.
So was this your Fire Festival?
It could have been my Fire Festival. I think if we attempted to try and get it, literally try to get it off the ground in a more sort of tangible kind of sense. But thankfully, we managed to realize that this was a terrible idea. But the fuck up component of this is just simply the time and energy and resource you spend even just trying to
thinking about
idea this. And there have definitely been occasions over the my whole career spanning a little over 2 decades now, but in particular in the last 10 years, I can point to a number of similar-ish examples where I've tried to get something off the ground, take us on some kind of little tangent, and it's not been good for the business. It's just a lack of focus sometimes. I think I'm plagued as an entrepreneur as being sometimes a little unfocused. Because focus ultimately when it comes to executing and growing a business is actually really about doing the hard and some cases boring stuff. And I tend to be, as an entrepreneur, very kind of drawn towards new, exciting, potentially groundbreaking ideas that will either succeed or fail. But I need to see them through to fruition to understand whether it was a good idea or not. And unfortunately, you don't always get to do that when you're running a business. It's not always smart, or it's not always responsible. And there have definitely been some fuck ups over the years where I've not done the smart or responsible thing. And I don't have a single regret because, again, I'm hopefully not repeating those mistakes, and I hope to not repeat those mistakes in the future.
Are you able to tell me what your current tangent crazy idea is?
No, not really.
Put you on the spot there. Well, whatever it is, good luck with it. So moving on. So what new belief or behavior has changed your work life in the last 5 years?
What new belief or behavior
has changed your work life? So not your whatever goes on behind closed doors.
Well, I think so. No, I can definitely speak to this, but just give me 1 second because I need to just cough, and I don't really want to listen necessarily.
It's going to stay on the podcast. You go make it.
All right, I'm back. Okay, so it's very personal. to me, but I think it's probably something that like, and you're very much in the thick of it as an entrepreneur, starting and running a business. But it's just so incredibly important to take care of yourself. There are no prizes for working such extraordinarily long hours and working yourself to the bone and not necessarily sleeping or exercising or eating well as an entrepreneur. The kind of the sort of the hustle porn phenomena that's driven by so many people out there in the industry whom I just completely detest is dangerous, and it's irresponsible in terms of how it's impacting young entrepreneurs' lives, because people believe that there is only one single pathway towards success. And it took me a little bit of time, probably took me my 20s to come to the realization that the way for me to counteract stress and the way for me to be at my most creative and the way for me to bring the kind of energy and positivity to what I do every single day is by first taking care of me before anyone else. And listen, I'm married, I have 2 young children. I still 100% believe that I have to take care of myself before I take care of my family. It's the only way that I can bring 100% of myself and the best version of who I am to everything that I do, including being a husband and a parent. And so in my early 30s, I started to get into kind of like marathons and doing triathlons and just doing things that kind of like are a little bit on the cusp of extreme. Because, unfortunately, just working out normally was just never that interesting for me. It always just felt like a bit of a chore. Whereas if I set myself a really ridiculous like goal, like running my first marathon in my early 30s, then I'd get my ass into gear every single day. And what I suddenly found was, like, through the training process, I was becoming way more creative. I was becoming way more able and capable of dealing with stress. Whatever stress I was carrying at the time would be completely evaporated, coming off the back of a particular training run. And then just like the sense of accomplishment that comes with running a marathon that is just so different to the sense of accomplishments that come with success that you might have in business, and having that as a complement is so important, I think, in life, or having that as a way of balancing out the various different things that you are pursuing in life is really important. So exercise, but on a slightly more kind of extreme level was one thing, and then like meditation, and just like diet, understanding that food is fuel, and that what you put in to your body has an impact on your mental health as much as it has an impact on your physical health. These are all kind of like really important things I think to factor in as well. And don't get me wrong, I'm not some kind of like yogi, someone who meditates twice a day and that is like, and that like sticks to a vegan diet. Like, I'm just not. But I think I'm pretty good at striking balance. Because ultimately balance is definitely important in terms of maintaining my mental health, and my mental health ultimately is just like pretty much the most important thing for me to kind of maintain and preserve in regards to my ability to be a great entrepreneur, a business leader, a husband, and a parent.
Well, that's reassuring to hear. I think one of the things that I struggle with is because I've a young family as well, and I'm often thinking, right, well, I feel relaxed and calm and unstressed, but there's always a kind of guilt associated to that. You're like, no, I should be like really stressed at 1 a.m. cramming a spreadsheet or something. But I like to think I'm getting towards having a balance. There is some exercise, there is good diet in my life, and yeah, doing a good job as well. My clients are happy. Money's being made and goals are being hit, right? So I can't be doing it that badly. But do you ever feel like you should be struggling more? And how do you know when you've got the right balance between the all of those things and a successful business?
Well, so a couple of things to that. So first of all, it's about how do you bring everything into alignment? So I don't really think about work-life balance, all of these sorts of things, because it's never really made a huge amount of sense to me. But that's not to say like I work all the time and I have no life. that I've figured out a way to bring much of this into alignment. I'll give you one sort of specific example. So I'm very fortunate to have, some of my closest friends, people I love the most in the world, also just happen to be very successful entrepreneurs, men and women who are doing extraordinary things in their lives. And I was very intentional when I moved to New York that I wanted to spend time with people who are inspirational to me in every facet of life, not just in terms of business, because many of these people also have young families and are model parents, or at least are struggling in the ways that we're all struggling, but but are really wonderful leading examples for me in terms of how to think about striking the kind of the right balance. So bring it all into alignment. I get to spend time with people who inspire me both personally and professionally, and that's just one small but specific example of what I mean.
I think that's a lovely bit of sort of lifestyle design. But I'm gonna have to leave it there because we're getting short on time, and you've led me off on a merry path into the way that you run your life, and it's inspiring in its own right, and I really appreciate that. But we have to talk about technology as well. So we were chatting before this call, and you had some really interesting ideas around what your shiny new object, which is human first technology. Now that's not something that I'd come across as a term. So can you explain what that is and then tell me a bit more about it?
Totally. So I've for most of my career, I have been focused on understanding technology's role and impact in regards to how we as human beings connect and communicate. I mean, the sort of the arc, I suppose, of technological progress and evolution, starting from kind of the printing press all the way up to kind of mobile technology and social media, has been sort of marked by the ways in which it's had a transformative effect in terms of how information is spread and how we as humans connect and communicate. And it's always been interesting to me academically, and now I'm in this amazing position through Social Media Week to bring people together and have conversations around what that really means and how technology is impacting us today and how it will continue to enable us to evolve into the future. However, we are obviously today, 2019, at a little bit of an inflection point because society is kind of like coming to this realization that technology perhaps is not serving us in the way that we had hoped. Is it bringing us closer together? Is it making us easier to connect and communicate? In what ways are the forces of technology serving us and the needs of human beings in regards to impacting the human experience in possible ways, impacting human progress so that we're moving forward and evolving in the way that we are ultimately excited and inspired about? And I think there are just a lot of questions around that at the moment. And I think that many of the answers point to the fact that something needs to fundamentally change. And one of the things that I think is important is for us to kind of reset a little bit and spend more time thinking about how does technology serve us rather than how do we become a slave to technology. And that's what really human first technology speaks to, is about always having a human-centered mindset and being human-centric as we design these different tools and technologies, and as we embrace and jump onto the latest new platform or embrace the latest new shiny object, is to be really conscious about how is it serving us, or are we just simply continuing to be on this like path towards sort of technology slavery. We today excuse me, we spend an inordinate amount of our time on Facebook and Instagram, and using Google's technologies and products, and on Twitter, etc., etc. And I really don't want to single out a specific technology or platform. They're all basically the same, but we have to look at the economic models of these different businesses and ask ourselves, are those economic models working in alignment with our needs? And I think the answer to that question is probably not. It doesn't matter how well-intentioned these companies are, and I think they really are really well-intentioned, but they're just not designed to necessarily serve our needs at the most fundamental level. So human-first technology, really should point to the ways in which technology is serving us. And I'll give you one example. I I don't in any way, I'm not in any way suggesting this is the answer or the solution, but I think it's just interesting. So the blockchain, part of the blockchain, which is interesting, is obviously decentralization of kind of how information is spread. And the fact that it also opens up an opportunity for us to kind of own our own identities online, and those identities can ultimately become portable. So being able to own your identity and take your identity with you ultimately online gives you a lot more control. And having a lot more control is very much a human first idea in regards to how technology can serve you and your needs going forward. And so looking at the blockchain is kind of one example, spending time looking at new and emerging interfaces. Voice, obviously, I know people have talked about voice on this show a whole bunch, but voice technologies is a new interface. And the thing about voice that's so important is that it separates you from your device in terms of being glued to it 24/7, and it means you're going to spend less time staring at the screen and more time hopefully doing things that are more human-centric in nature. So these are just a kind of a couple of examples, and I can happily kind of build on this if you have follow-up questions.
So it's interesting that you say we have to look at economic models and ask ourselves, are they working along with our needs? And I think that those businesses that you mentioned obviously are there to drive a profit, and they have to consistently deliver a ginormous growing profit, or kind of whole hell breaks loose in every area of that business. So is it realistic that any of the mega giants that you just mentioned would ever not optimize every activity to profit?
Well, I think it's a great question. Maybe the short and easy answer is like no, which means there needs to be a new model. But then again, if you talk about new models, we're talking about like a new model of capitalism, which is probably not necessarily something we want to spend a huge amount of time talking about because we don't have that much time. But I think that, when you look at Facebook or some of the other platforms and the initiatives and programs that they're working on, they are trying to do things that are in the best interest of their users. And you can make an argument that in some cases, this isn't like necessarily good for short-term or immediate growth or profitability. And so to a certain extent, I think there's some really interesting things happening. But I always come back to one of the biggest challenges, which is that if your mission as an organization has to be in alignment with the way in which you make money. And if there's a complete separation, then I think you're not being truthful to yourself or to your constituents, the users of your different products and services. I don't have a problem with Facebook making money and being like massively profitable. I just, or of Google or of Twitter or of any of these different companies. I just have a problem with the misalignment between mission and idealism around why they exist and how they ultimately make money. If you can bring those things more into alignment, then these consumers have a choice, and it's clear in terms of what your relationship is with these different platforms and technology. And hopefully in the future that there will be more choice, more option, or more opportunity to be able to choose services that are designed to serve your needs at a fundamentally human level, and not in such a way so that you feel like you and your data and your personal information is being traded.
And who do you think's doing a good job of that at the minute?
I really do think Facebook is doing a good job, and that's part of why I don't read the news, because if you did, then you'd have a slightly different and skewed perspective on things. But no technology company is putting more resource behind data privacy. No technology company is putting more resource behind how to prevent the spread, the spread of misinformation and fake news. There's no company that is invested more, is employing more people to be thinking about this stuff. So I think that like they are doing an enormous amount. But the question is it enough, or is it potentially too late?
And is that behaviour a reaction? Or is that because before it all kicked off last couple of years, their whole point was, we're a tech platform. We're not. They even call themselves a social network.
And that was it. Which is a tech platform, and like, you know, you go and build whatever you want to build on top of this platform, and you know, all the rest of it. And whereas now they're in a position where they absolutely have to. And I don't know if it's the same in New York, but there's an advertising campaign in London as we speak that basically says we're nice and you should trust us again. And I definitely didn't see any of that kind of pre-Cambridge Analytica. So I'm dubious, but it's great to hear someone talk with passion about how you believe that someone like Facebook is trying to marry up what we need with the way that they make money. So we're going to have to leave it there. Toby, thank you so much. I really did get lost in your view of life and the way that you organise and inspire yourself. That was really great to hear, and I'm sorry we didn't get to spend as much time talking about human-centered technology or human-first technology as we could have done. And hopefully next time I see you, we can go into that. But if anyone is interested in Social Media Week or Crowdcentric, how would you want anyone to get in touch with you?
Definitely. Well, the thing for anyone who wants to kind of continue the conversation, or at least like be part of this broader conversation, Social Media Week is obviously a great place to kind of come. You know, our theme this year is stories with great influence comes great responsibility, and it speaks to a lot of this. In particular, like, we are a product of the stories and the content we consume. It shapes us in terms of how we evolve ultimately. So go to mediaweek.org for involved, whether it's attending conferences or just like connecting with us online.
Brilliant. Okay, so socialmediaweek.org. You just broke up there just to get that right. Toby, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. That was a fantastic conversation, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, Tom.